Good morning. Welcome to Practical Project Management. This is the first in our Advanced Project Management series, and this is about people-centered project management. We're going to talk about relationships, which is really the most important part of project management once you get past the basic mechanics. As always, I'm going to start with some information about myself, because if this is the first time that you've joined me on a webinar, I want you to feel comfortable that I actually know what I'm talking about. My name is Kim Wasson. My educational background is a bachelor's in computer science from Cal State and a master's degree from Stanford. I've had positions from line engineer up to vice president at companies as big as IBM and eBay and as small as brand new startups before I started my own company. And at every one of those, and of course at my own company, I have used project management and project management concepts no matter what the job title was. I started Ivy Bay Consulting 10 years ago, and my specialties are tailored solutions for project and program management and untangling messy projects. I do coaching for project and program management and time management, and I do process improvement work. I work heavily with distributed and international teams, so I understand those challenges and how they relate to project management specifically. So if you want more information, you can go to my website, ivybay.com. There are blogs, there are pointers, there's all kinds of information out there. So let's get started. As always, what shall we talk about today? We're going to talk about how project management is really both a match game and a balancing act. We're going to talk, of course, about the art of relationships, because that's the core of this webinar. We'll talk about teams and individuals and how relationships apply to both. We'll talk about goals and motivation, learning and working styles, which is an extremely helpful concept to establish relationships in project management and to get information out. We'll talk about skill sets, some special information about working with volunteers, a bit about tools that you can use for these relationship establishments and other things. And then, of course, we'll recap with things to remember. Chat's enabled. If you need anything, just type something in there or raise your hand. And here we go. Project management is both a match game and a balancing act. You have to match people with jobs, people you have available, the jobs you have available. You have to match people with people, because sometimes people don't mesh very well. You want to match people with learning styles. We'll get into that a little later, and goals. And you need to make sure that you have motivation available for folks. And then, of course, you have to balance the business needs with the people needs. The people wouldn't be there if the project wasn't there. So business needs or project needs. Common goals of the project with the individual goals of the people have to be balanced. And you have to balance immediate progress with sustained improvement. Sticks work really short term and usually only once. What you really want to work for, sometimes you have to get a bump. You have to get something done. You got to push. You got to get it done right now. But you don't want to keep doing that over and over again. You really want to fix things so that you've got sustained improvement and productivity without hurting people. So the core of this is the art of relationships. Relationships with your team members are built one-on-one. You do not build a relationship with an individual in a weekly team meeting. It just doesn't happen, and you have to work at it. When you build your relationships, you have to start from scratch, unless this is someone you actually know well and have worked with before. That means you don't make any assumptions about them. That means you take anything anyone has told you about these people with a huge spoonful of salt. That means you don't assume anything based on their age, based on their experience, even based on what they're good at. You really need to start from scratch, not assume they're like you, not assume they're like anyone else, and open yourself up to understanding what they're about. So in order of usefulness, here are ways to establish and maintain relationships. If they are where you can actually see them, you want to stop by. You want to actually be a presence there, and you want to do that not only when you need something. You want to stop by in the morning and say, hi, how's it going? You want to get a cup of coffee, or just stop by and say hi. Be a presence, Give them a chance to say something. Now, there are folks who get very nervous with this, especially if you're in a position of perceived authority. So watch for those signs. You're not going to help your relationship if you've got someone who's cowering and ducking whenever you show up. So that's kind of the exception to this. But if you can, stop by. Schedule meetings with people one-on-one and make it their time. This is not the time when you chew them out for something they did wrong. This is really their time, and you want to let it for them to bring things up. You want them to be comfortable bringing things up. You will learn a great deal, and you will establish this relationship. Now, I think it goes without saying, but maybe it doesn't. So I will say it. This is not, we're going to go out to dinner kind of relationships. These are business relationships. But a little bit of personal information helps. So feel free to share a little bit, right? Don't overshare. Don't require anyone to share anything personal about themselves. But if you make it okay to say, I'm going to a play tonight, I really love this stuff, you're going to get some more openings. In these meetings that you have with folks, don't be afraid of quiet. Let people collect their thoughts. If they come in with nothing, something will come up if you give it time. You don't have to fill all the silences. Calls are good, and sometimes your meetings are calls. If someone is on the other side of the world, you're not going to be sitting down with them. That's both Skype calls, not instant messaging, but Skype calls and phone calls. Both of them work quite well. It's not quite as good as face-to-face, so video conferencing actually can be better if a little stilted because you can see visual cues. But when you're on a phone call with someone, you can interpret the silences, you can interpret the tone of voice. You get a lot of information from that. Video conferencing is a great thing, and it's so easy. With Skype, it's much harder to view someone as an annoyance or as an email address when you actually see their face. So what do we have? Seem to have lost our screen share. Let me just make sure that we've got everything. I'm not sure what happened there. Okay, we're back to it. I'm sorry about that. I'm sorry you had to take a look at me and my headset looking at my other monitor. I wear a headset because my office cats are very helpful in these, as are my office dogs and security systems. So where were we? Video conferencing. Sometimes video conferencing, it's not your best choice. When I work with people in Eastern Europe and I'm on calls at 6:30 or 7 in the morning, I don't really want to be video conferencing most of that time. I want some preparation time if I'm going to be video conferencing, because I don't think it really instills a lot of confidence for someone to see me, in my bathrobe, eating my oatmeal and drinking my coffee. But video conferencing in general is a really good thing. Instant messaging is useful. That you don't want that to be your only method of communication, but it is at least feedback. It's you can't interpret silences because you don't know if someone's off checking their mail or something, but you can add some tone of voice. You've got some emoticons, and you've got a back and forth with instant messaging. Email is not a relationship establishment or management method. Email is information delivery, and that's it. You can't tell tone of voice. By the time someone responds, you may have gone on to do something else, or they're already upset, and you got to try to backtrack and fix that because they misinterpreted something. So email is not part of establishing or maintaining a relationship. Sometimes you have big teams. I've had teams up to 300 people, and then what you want to do with that, you can't have relationships with 300 people on your team. But typically you have a core team or a steering committee or something along those lines, and those are the people that you work on relationships with. But you start to set things up so that they establish relationships with their teams, right? You ask them those leading questions. How's your team feeling about this? How's your team feeling in general? They're working a lot of overtime. Do they need anything? so that they get used to being able to answer those questions, which means that they are asking those questions. And then you have to, relationships have to be maintained. You have to spend time, you have to stop by, you have to call, you have to spend time with folks. So let's move on to teams and individuals. So let's say you've established relationships with everybody on your team. That helps you manage team dynamics. That helps you understand how people interact. Why am I getting this? I'm sorry, we seem to be having some real technical difficulties here. Oh, okay. All right, I think we're fine. But that doesn't necessarily mean that you have a relationship as a team. Teams have their own personalities, and you need to work with that. We're going to talk a little bit more about that. So goals. Goals are an important part of maintaining relationships. Your project or your business is going to have goals. You need to understand which of those goals are absolutely fixed. You've got to achieve them. They can't be moved, and which ones might be negotiable. And then you need to work with your team on how to achieve them. You're going to have ideas about that, but they are not going to buy in if you don't give them that chance. So, come to them with this information. Let them know where things are fixed. You may have business processes that you cannot change, that you must do, and where you have a chance to adjust, and where and what the goals are and how best to achieve them. And you want to keep those in front of people. Now, everybody also will have their own goals. So what you want to do, obviously the goals of the project are paramount. Otherwise you wouldn't be a team. People wouldn't be there. People wouldn't be getting paid or volunteering or whatever they're doing. But everybody has their own goals, and what is going on here today? Okay, let's see if we've got it. This is not working. Okay, let's try again. I'm very sorry about this. Webinars on Air seems to be having some serious problems, or Google is, or something. So we're talking about individual goals. You need to figure out how to achieve those individual goals as much as possible, or accommodate them within the scope of your project. That's important. People have goals. They need to find ways to meet them. If someone has a goal of moving from business analysis to programming, maybe you can find some programming for them to do, or put them in code reviews, or whatever it is that's going to help them achieve that goal within the scope of the project. And then you need to keep the goals in front of yourself, in front of your team. Every meeting, have them on the agenda, go through them, make sure you know if something changed. Let's move on to motivations. One of the shortcuts we all take, one of the assumptions that we all make, is that everybody is motivated by the same things we are, and that is absolutely not true. You don't want to assume that there are as many motivations as there are people. So you're going to work to uncover motivations with people. And once you think you have it, and people are working well and they're motivated, check back, see if they've changed. Sometimes you're going to learn this by observation. Sometimes you can ask people. A really good question for those regular meetings is, what makes you get up and want to come to work in the morning? What makes you happy here? And then check back, see if they've changed. People's lives change, people change. What motivates them changes as some motivations are met. Maybe some other ones are going to show up. So it's a moving target, like most things in project management. If you have people who are dragging, they're not getting things done in time, they don't make it to meetings on time, they're unenthusiastic, they're not listening, they're doodling, they're unmotivated, and one of those people can sink your whole project really quickly, and it is contagious. So it's really, really an important factor to consider. Some of the things that are really common motivators: recognition, particularly in the US, recognition is a big deal. Even as much or as little as saying in the team meeting, this person did a really good job. You know, they found this new way of doing stuff. Why don't you tell us about it? Or that kind of pat on the back. Certificates, little things actually mean a great deal to folks. Now, everyone is not like this, and particularly culturally, there are people who are extremely embarrassed by that kind of thing, and you need to figure that out in a hurry, because you're demotivating them if you're doing this kind of recognition in public. But for the most part in the US, recognition is a big deal, and rewards are a big deal. And you know, sometimes that's, you know, I get an iPad, I get a new laptop. Sometimes it's a trophy kind of thing. Sometimes it's something very little. I used to do tchotchkes a lot. One of the places I had a lot of project managers with a lot of projects each, and I got little ninja figures, and every time someone finished a project, they got a little ninja figure. And if they did something really big, they got a sword or a stand-up ninja or something like that. And there were little ninjas on top of cube walls everywhere. And it was just a fun thing, and it didn't offend any of the folks for whom recognition was uncomfortable, because everybody got them. It didn't cost much, but it meant a big deal. It meant a lot. People could look at those and say, I finished that many projects. Money is often a motivator. The motivation provided by money tends to be fairly short term. And as project managers, we often don't really have that kind of an option, but we do have the ability to give someone a good review, to give them a good recommendation, to split team awards up. So use it where you can. For some people, challenges are the big thing. A lot of times these are bleeding edge, brand new things, new technology, new products, new whatever, new methods. They want to do that. Where you can, let them go for it. Other people want to learn. That doesn't necessarily mean they need new stuff. They need stuff that's new to them. So find out what they know, and if there's something new on the project that doesn't require a huge amount of expertise, set them to it. Some people like to teach. Some people like to teach even when we don't feel like being taught. While that can be annoying, it can also be really useful. Pair those people with someone who needs to learn something. Put them with your new intern. Put them with someone who's coming up to speed on a technology. You'll win, but from a project perspective, and both the person who likes to teach and the person who needs to learn are going to benefit from that. For a lot of people, time off to pursue a hobby, time off just to relax, time off to spend with their manager or with their family. It's a big deal. Don't be afraid to use that. People will work harder. They will put their time in if they know they're going to get something out of it. If it continues to be just a grind, that's demotivating. And then one of the biggest ones is trust. You have to trust people. You can't be looking over their shoulders all the time. Now, of course, it takes a while to build trust. So start with small things for folks that you don't know, and work your way up. Find out where the level is, where you know it's safe to trust them in terms of the project. Some people are just going to take off and run with stuff, and that's terrific. And they are going to be very happy that you trust them to do that. So learning and working styles. This is something that I've been working with for maybe 6 or 7 years. This is really, really powerful stuff. So the idea is that people learn best, they take in information best in one or two ways. And this goes back to the 1970s. It's been known since then, but it's been used primarily in elementary education. It's exploded over the past decade. The research has exploded, the applications have exploded, and it's really useful in your work as project manager. So we're going to talk about the various working styles. or learning styles, but I have to tell you that most people know. There are tests that you can take, but most people, when they see the descriptions, they know what they are. The primary working styles are visual, reading, auditory, tactile, and kinetic. So visual, these icons are from a website called learningstyles.org. I've got this down in here. And they do have tests, online tests that you can take to see what you are, but they do have a lot further breakdown of learning styles that are obviously applicable generically in a workplace. They aren't. Things like olfactory, you know, what you can smell is not really going to help much in many workplaces. If you're in a medical workplace or something like that, it might, but in general, we're going to stick with these ones. So visual people learn best, obviously, when information is highly visible. They like charts, they like graphs, they like colors, they like visual cues. So presenting information for visual learners mean that that's what you're going to show them. You're going to show them charts and graphs. You're going to show them summarized information. You're going to show them pictures as much as possible because they'll be able to take those in. Now you can see in most of my webinars, most of my presentations, I have pictures, even if there's just a little picture up in the corner. And that's for the visual folks. If your eyes are going immediately to those pictures, if you're watching for them, then you're probably a visual person. So when you send out meeting minutes, when you give presentations, you want to have that summary information front and center for the visual folks. Now, an offshoot of it is reading. This used to be part of visual, but even in the, whatever it is, 7 years since I've been looking at this, it's been split off. And by the way, there's a lot of neuroscience behind this. I've actually read some of the papers, and they are fascinating, but really hard to slog through. But this is actual, you know, this is physiological. Folks who learn by reading like written words. These are the people like me for whom IKEA directions are torture. I want the words. I want to see them. For these folks, the summary is fine, but that's not going to be enough for them. They're not going to look at a chart and feel like they have enough information. You're going to need the words. You're going to need details. These are the folks who are going to look at a chart and say, or a graph and say, well, what are the numbers? Show me the numbers. I want to see them in a table. So for those folks, you want to provide that information. And this all is really simple, right? You have a graph and you have the table of values available right there with it. Most graphing programs will make that an option. It's not a hard thing to do. When you do meeting minutes, bold the summary information and then provide the detail information behind it. It's not that tough to do to accommodate a lot of people very easily. Now, there are auditory folks who process best when they hear. If you are listening to this webinar and not really looking at the slides, you're probably auditory. So for folks who are auditory, when you get into a meeting that you're holding, read the agenda. Don't depend on them to read it themselves. Don't gloss over it, as many of us who are more visual tend to do. Well, you can all read this. They don't want to read it. That's hard. That doesn't work as well for folks who are auditory. So read aloud whatever you can. You may find that they read stuff out loud to themselves. So when you summarize at the end of a meeting, don't say, I'll put that in the minutes, say it, and then put it in the minutes. Tactile people need to touch things. So if you walk into a meeting and there's a printed agenda, even if you've had it in email and you grab it, you're probably tactile. For tactile learners, taking notes, even when there are handouts, helps. So for those folks, you want to provide a printed version wherever you can. Now, fortunately, in our environment, a lot of times those folks, if they have the stuff ahead of time, they'll have already printed it out. For those folks, note cards and Post-it notes, anything that can be touched is going to help them. But you don't really have to provide all of that. The folks who are tactile know it, and they typically do provide it. And then the last is kinetic. And this is another one that when I started, it was part of tactile, and it's very closely related, and a lot of the things are the same. But the kinetic learners need to either move the information or move themselves. There needs to be some motion associated with it. So they're going to take notes as well. They're going to touch things. They're also going to shuffle papers. They're going to want to get up and walk around. They're the ones whose foot is always tapping. Um, I am myself reading and kinetic. And one of the things that I do, I used to just, when I was a kid in school, I would, every margin was full of drawings. And I'm not particularly artistic, but I had to keep that moving in order to focus. And then as I got older and PDAs became available and laptops, I actually will do something like play solitaire. And I found that other kinetic learners do exactly the same thing to try to focus, because something like that will use up enough of our brain to keep us from going and checking email or getting distracted, but not so much that we are not able to keep up. So when you have someone in your meeting who you think is doing email, except they seem to be keeping up, they answer questions, they, they're actually there, but they're not looking at you, they're looking at something else, that may be what they're doing. So give them a break, because it's how they focus. So how do you do this? Most people listening to this, you probably know what your style or styles are. Most people have more than one. There are online tests, but most people don't need them, and I have that information available a little later here, some of the sites. So you can tell people about this, and you can share yours before encouraging them, but not requiring them to share theirs. You're gonna figure it out pretty quickly with folks anyway. All you have to do is observe. If they grab for the agenda, they're tactile or kinetic. If they're moving around, they're kinetic. If they are not looking at any of the printed or displayed materials, they're auditory. So you kind of get that. You never require anyone to share that kind of information. And what you want to do then is, as a project manager, provide information in as many forms as you can so that everyone can process the information in the way that's easiest to them. So this, we'd already talked about minutes, and I think we've talked about most of this on the way through. Provide your summary information with backup details. Discuss the information whenever possible. Provide a few printouts for the folks who need to touch them. If people want to get up and move around during meetings and it's not disrupting other people, some people can't focus if someone's moving around in a meeting, but if they can, let them do it. Otherwise, be patient with those folks who are looking down at their iPhone, as long as they're keeping up. Okay, let's talk a little bit about skill sets and matching skill sets. So I think most of us understand hard skills. You need a plumber, you need an electrician, you need someone who codes Java. Those are pretty easily definable, pretty easily observable. Where the trick comes in as a project manager is the soft skills. These are where you find your team builders. These are where you find your teachers. These are where you find the people who can document up a storm really quickly, the people who explain things very clearly, the people who do pattern matching really well. Sometimes you don't know what you need until you get a team together. Sometimes you do. Sometimes it's soft skills, like someone explains things really well, so you want to send them out and have them do the rah-rah, have them do the evangelist, play that role. Sometimes you're going to need that. Sometimes when you put your team together, you start to see the holes. If you don't have that person who's the team mom, your team's going to suffer, because the team mom, no matter how good or mediocre their hard skills are, they're the ones who get people to feel like they're part of a team, like they're part of something, like they're building something, like people care about them, like they're important. You have to have one of those people on your team, or your team does not function well, for example. So try to kind of look at those who communicates well verbally, who communicates well in written form, who documents well, who teaches, who provides the glue for the team. And those people who provide that glue, they're not always rah-rah people. Sometimes they're very quiet about it, but they're the ones whose office everyone is always in. I've got a problem, I want to come talk to them. And that's a really important thing to have. So let's talk a minute about volunteers. Working with volunteers is different than working in a business environment or in a a paid environment, because you have to do things much faster. People volunteer for some reason. They're motivated by something, and you got to figure that out in a hurry, because if those motivations aren't met, they're gone. And the easiest way, especially in a volunteer situation, is to ask them, what are you here? What are you hoping to get out of this? What's this doing for you? So that you can try to meet them as quickly as you can. You will often, and this one's harder to find, people have their own goals. It's not the same as a motivation. Motivations are I mean, there are definitely places where they converge, but people may be motivated altruistically. I really want to help people, but their goals might be something really different. And by doing this particular thing, I'm getting this kind of experience. I'm putting this kind of thing on my resume. Here's an example. Suppose you are installing new computers on a network at your child's school. Let's say this is an elementary school, and you have a team of folks, and everyone's taken the morning off to come to the school and do this. But one of the mothers has a child who's been having some trouble in the classroom, and her goal is to figure out what the heck's going on with that child. Now, if everything that needs to be done is in, like, say, a resource room, this parent's goal is not going to be met. And what's going to happen is she's either going to walk out, or she's going to find excuses to go into that classroom, and she's not going to be doing what you need for her to do. So now you've got two problems, right? You don't have enough people working on what you want to, and you didn't know ahead of time that that was going to be the case. So now you're down a person that you didn't expect to be down. You've made assignments and it's not working. Now, if there's something that needs to be done in that classroom, you can shuffle assignments and send her off to do that, so you at least get something done with yours. But in general, when that kind of thing happens, you're better off without that person on your team, because at least you know that you're down a person and you can adjust. So when you have a volunteer team, you don't have this expectation of how things work. In a business environment, people come in kind of knowing the ground rules. What's in a meeting? There's going to be an agenda. We're going to walk out with action items, that kind of thing. If you're building a house, the electrician comes, and the electrician knows that there are going to be plans. There's going to be a general contractor working with them. He knows what state things are going to be in by the time he gets there. This is not necessarily true with volunteers, and this is where I'm going to tell the story where I really learned this in spades. I volunteered to be the lead for my daughter's grad night, her senior year in high school. Now, that grad night at that school is always held on campus, and it's huge. It takes an entire year of preparations, and the estimate is 3,500 volunteer hours. So it is an enormous effort, but is entirely staffed by volunteers. So I had ended up with a steering committee team, the people with the various departments, where two of the people were business people, and these women came in with a business expectation. We're going to walk through things. One of the folks was just a really easygoing guy. He's a contractor, and he just kind of went with the flow. And several of the people, this was what they did. They were this was a social activity for them as well as a volunteer activity, and they got places by what I call meandering. And you'll see this in business too. But what happens is they arrive at a conclusion. The only real way is to just kind of wander through what feel like non sequiturs, and being off point, and they will eventually meander around to a good answer. And that's how they work. That's how their minds work. Well, I had a full-blown, the first thing that happened was trying to enforce an agenda alienated those folks who meandered. So I got a lot less strict on the agenda, and then the business women were ready to quit because they wanted to come in, give their report, make whatever decisions needed to be made, and go. What I finally ended up doing was setting up the agenda. So we made any group decisions that needed to be made first. The reports from the two folks who wanted to walk down in a business-like way were made first, and then they could stay or not stay. Everybody else could meander, and I would send out concise minutes the next day so they could get the results of the meeting without having to sit through the meandering. But I almost lost my whole team trying to deal with that. So realize that in a business environment, yes, you need to make those kinds of adjustments, but you have a base set of expectations and you have a way of enforcing them. And in a volunteer situation, you really don't. There's also, you can't expect any kind of a shared knowledge base with volunteers. So you need to assume that no one knows anything. Print out the instructions, make flow charts, because you don't know how they best absorb information and you may not have a chance to figure it out. And even if folks have heard it before, say it again, because you don't know that they've heard it before. You may think so, but maybe they've heard it once because you've seen their face, you assume they know that, but they've only heard it once. So make sure that the information is available in multiple forms. Don't skimp on it. And finally, you have no leverage. You just need to recognize that they're not going to get fired. You have all you can do is try to meet their needs so they meet the project needs. So work on it from that perspective. So teams need care and feeding. You have to set the tone for the team and the project and help them get a team identity. Every team will be a little different. Some of this, you may reinforce with tchotchkes like the ninjas. But some of it, you find out what motivates them and you set that as part of their identity. They'll come up with it to some extent on their own, but you need to help it along. You really need to understand the characteristics of the team, who works together, who doesn't, what things are contagious within the team, which things are contagious that are good and which things are contagious that aren't good. Demotivation might be a not good thing. People being tired. Going off the deep end on some, technical black hole that doesn't need to be done, panic, all of those kinds of things. Understand how they're going to react to things and help the individual team members based on your relationships with them and your understanding of them, help them work together. Know which people do not go well together. Some people you get into a room with and the hair on the back of your neck goes up and you're spitting as soon as they walk into the room. We all have those people, and I don't know what it is, but there's just some chemical reaction that happens that doesn't work. Don't try to make those people sit together and work together for long periods of time. It's not going to work. Everyone's going to be upset. Figure a way around it. And then make sure you focus on the common goals. You have team goals. You need to keep those front and center, and you need to celebrate them. You can, you celebrate milestones, of course. Celebrate smaller victories. If you're, running a piece of a plan and everything in that piece gets done on time, celebrate. Point it out. Bring in chocolate, whatever you want to do. Let people go early on a Friday. Say take Friday afternoon off. Have regular Friday celebrations, and feed it into your team identity. Let's have a Hawaiian shirt Friday. Let's, and we'll bring in virgin margaritas and have a good time for an hour on Friday afternoon. Whatever it is, celebrate your successes, even the small ones. Now, I'm going through this because this can help you, but this is something that can give you, this from a team perspective, a solid understanding of goals and priorities. And it can help your team work more effectively, individually, and as a team, and will give them a basis of common understanding. So if you haven't seen this before, it's got a lot of different names. It's in a lot of different time management systems. But President Eisenhower, when he was a general, he used this. And really what it is very simple. There are two axes, things that are urgent and things that are important, which gives you 4 quadrants. One of them is urgent, not important. That's, someone sent you a Skype message, your phone is ringing. It's stuff that you don't need to do, but it's in front of you. Someone stopped by your cube and they are just going to talk forever. You want to avoid this. This is a place where you are wasting your time, so you need to recognize it and avoid it. Urgent and important, like a system crash, like someone's going to the hospital. These are the things that you have to do. They're important, and there's some reason that they are in front of you, and you've got to take care of them right now. So that's where you work first. You've got to do those things. But important, not urgent, is where your goal should be to spend time on things that are important and not urgent. If you don't spend your time on those, they're going to become urgent, and then you're going to be under the gun, and you're not going to do as good a job, and it's not going to be very pleasant. So sometimes that's learning new things, right? Sometimes that's, reorganizing your notes. Sometimes, I mean, there are a lot of things there that they are important, but you tend to not get to them because of urgent things. In the case of urgent and important, that's the right choice. In the case of urgent and not important, it's not the right choice. So you need to focus here, and you need to get your team to focus here as much as possible to avoid spending time here in this urgent and important quadrant, because that's panic time in a lot of cases. And then you have this not urgent and not important, like, checking your Facebook at work. Don't do it. Recognize that you're spending time here, and usually that's an avoidance technique. And jettison those. Those are things that you should not be doing. And you're going to find a lot more time, and you're going to help your team focus by giving them this tool. Okay, so other tools and how to learn them. So we've got the learning styles that we went through. A lot of folks really like Myers-Briggs. If you haven't done that before, you'll see people talking about INTF, the 4-letter terms, and you get to that by answering a bunch of questions. Now, taking the Myers-Briggs is kind of expensive, and then there's an interpretation. There's something called the Keirsey Sorter online, which is a lot quicker. Sometimes this can be a really good thing for team members who really don't understand each other. They do these questions, they get this understanding of how they operate in that kind of an arena, and they get understanding of other people. Oh, they're not avoiding me, they're introverted. This is not comfortable for them. It opens up a communications path, but there are some downsides to this. One of them is people don't want to take it. It makes them uncomfortable. They don't want to do this, or if they take it, they don't want to share, and you don't want to force that kind of thing. The other thing that happens is people get pigeonholed in this. Oh, you're INTF, that means you're like this. Well, the fact is that for most people, if you take it 2 different times of day, you will get 2 different answers on Myers-Briggs based on your mood. Some of that is dependent on how close to even on each of those axes you are. So, pigeonholing people based on something that's changeable with their mood and certainly changes over time is kind of dangerous, but it can provide an initial understanding if you're careful about how it's used. Time management and reminder systems are going to help you keep on track of stuff, and they're going to help your folks keep on track of stuff and prioritize, as is his Eisenhower matrix. Meetings are important tools. Use them wisely. Have an agenda. We talked about effective meetings, or we're going to anyway. Make them count. Don't have meetings that don't mean anything. Have your one-on-one meetings where people have a chance to tell you what's in their mind, what's going on. And minutes are an excellent tool. If someone needs to take minutes I always take minutes for my own meetings. And if someone needs minutes taken for them, I take them. They're important communication tools, but you need to understand that whoever's taking the minutes for a meeting, they control reality. No one's really going to remember everything that happened in that meeting. So whatever the minutes say, that's the record. So use them well. Format them so people can understand them. They can take in that information, use them as an audit trail. They're a very powerful tool. Okay, so what do you want to remember out of this relationship thing? People are the core of any project. Without people, your project doesn't happen. Your beautiful schedules, all the stuff in the basics, all the mechanics, your good processes, they can pretty much be blown apart in a minute by people who are unmotivated, whose goals are not being met, who are unhappy with the team. So you need to develop relationships with your team and the team members and your business associates. So it's not just your team, it's the folks that you're getting information from for your team. It's the people you're providing information to. It's your clients, your customers. All of those people you need to have some touch points with. It doesn't have to be huge and full blown, but you need to have some understanding of how they're working. You need to understand the common goals of your project, and you need to understand the individual's goals and find some ways to achieve them both. You should take time to understand and satisfy individual motivators, especially based on this other bullet. And you need to understand learning styles and present the information in ways that folks can process. And that, again, that's pretty easy to do if you set yourself up correctly. Understand skills, both hard skills and soft skills, and how to deploy them, how to build and enhance them, how they mesh together, how they fit in with goals. Use whatever tools are available whenever possible. Use everything. Build out your toolbox. As a project manager, your toolbox is your livelihood. The more tools you have, because project management is very situational, the more tools you have, the better you're going to be. And remember that it's a balancing act. You're balancing individual needs, individuals with business and team needs. So, I'm sorry about all the technical difficulties. We're running a little, well, we're running just about on time. So if you have any questions, put them in the chat room. Let me know about that. And I'll wait a minute or two because I know there's a lag. Well, okay. So upcoming webinars, my basics series I am not presenting right now, but I have it available through webinar recordings, and if you want those, you can sign up for the series. You'll get all the recordings, and then we'll have a Q&A. We have a scheduled Q&A session where you can ask your questions, hear what other folks have to say. And then the next, excuse me, the next set in our advanced series, we've got risk coming up next. Project communication, we're going to talk more about meetings and minutes and status reports and all kinds of things like that. We'll talk about root cause analysis. We have one on process improvement that's called Making It Better. We have a systems analysis a component webinar. We're going to go through some traditional techniques, and then we're going to talk, we have a session on Agile just to introduce that concept. And you can check out the website for more information. Okay, thanks everybody.